Welcome back, everyone. We're Performance Agile. I'm Vince.
I'm Eric.
And today we are talking about Kanban. So for today's quote, we are quoting Mr. Taiichi Ohno. And Taiichi Ohno is the founder of essentially Kanban and the Lean Toyota production system. He has many quotes, but for today, we're going to quote him on the let the flow manage the process, not the managers administer the flow.
Because we're talking about Kanban, much like Scrum, is another framework or set of processes that is a vehicle in which teams can utilize other methodologies to build and deploy and manage software. So when we're talking about Kanban as a cumulative flow process, what does that mean?
Well, it means a lot. You know, I've heard Kanban characterized as, well, it's a framework, or it's lean, it's this, it's that. It's a lot of things. It is a great tool. It's a great philosophy even. You know, it has comes with its own little set of philosophies with it. Because it's just so powerful and so adaptive to basically anything, anywhere. But make no mistake, in the software world, because it started in automobile manufacturing in Toyota as part of the Toyota production system. But when used in software, it's usually used with another framework, or it can be used by itself. But I think, as we talk a little bit more as we go, I've personally found where Kanban used by itself is usually something that a software team or a technology team graduates into when you're taking off the training wheels, or you're taking off the guardrails, the little bumpers when you're a kid and you're bowling and you got the little bumpers up. Scrum is good for software, specifically applications. And, when you're just getting a team started and into a groove and into a rhythm, those iteration, those time boxes, they're good guardrails for the team to kind of get into that mindset. Mm-hmm. But when you pull those guardrails off and you really want a team to be self-empowered and self-organizing, and they pull their own work, they're not, nobody's tasking them work and things like that, Kanban is the way to go. I absolutely love Kanban.
That's pretty dense.
It is.
So let's define Kanban real quick before we go any further.
Sure.
So we know that it started with Japan and the Toyota production model, and Kanban is a literal translation to visual board. Mm-hmm. So saying Kanban board is visual board. You would just say we have a Kanban.
It's pretty common. It happens all the time.
It's like ATM machine, automated teller machine. It happens.
It happens all the time.
People they double up.
We overlook it, though. It's okay.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It is a lean methodology. So what does that mean? What is lean in context here?
Well, so when Taiichi Ohno, started putting this together, he was really looking at ways to make a flow of work and reduce waste. And waste is categorized in a variety of different ways. So he didn't want, in manufacturing, when we get into a little bit more of the history, you'll understand this, but he didn't want too much supply if he didn't have enough demand, because, an imbalance in any one of these things that in that flow would disrupt that flow. So in order to apply a lean framework like this, it's all about that flow. Mm-hmm. And that's what really Kanban is about. It's all about the flow.
That's right. And one of the big things about this flow and how Toyota implemented this flow is visualization of it all. Mm-hmm. They would have workstations that would have colored placards above them signaling like what stage of the process they were in and if they were going to be ready to get queued up for another work item. So, when we have behind us is our personal visualization of the work that we want to do. It's very simple.
It's a very, very simple Kanban.
Yeah. Backlog ready and work done. Mm-hmm. Now, we could have either done 3 columns. We could have done backlog in work done. We could have just prioritized our backlog and we didn't even need a ready column. But I mean, I've seen teams that have like 10 columns. It's really all just what teams need. It's up to the team to depend on, how they want to visualize that work and break out their work.
Yeah.
And then the big one is work limits.
Yeah. When you think about manufacturing, and especially in automobile manufacturing, and you've got that production line, and when you're building a car, they build it in pieces, right? And so every phase, you're adding. So you're incrementally building your product as you go through this flow, right? It could be one color or one feature or this or that. And so they'll toggle between, what the requirements are. And then if at any point, something seems unsafe or isn't right, that the team has the power to stop the flow and assess and correct when they're working.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start talking about how it came about, like the origin of it, we already said it was Toyota, but Taiichi Ohno was studying supermarkets and how we as consumers go to the store, we buy only what we need at the time.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, if they have too much stock on hand, some of that stock that's sitting in the storeroom could go bad. It could be wasted. It could be thrown out. So Piggly Wiggly, Walmart, and other supermarkets like them over time have developed a system that says, hey, we only want enough inventory on hand to replace what was taken, to reduce the amount of waste, to reduce the amount of, excess in system.
Right.
So I'm going to read this word for word.
Okay.
Kanban aligns inventory levels with actual consumption. A signal will tell a supplier to produce and deliver a new shipment when a material is consumed. The signal is tracked through the replenishment cycle, bringing visibility to the supplier, consumer, and buyer. And how does that manifest itself in today's Kanban?
Well, so it depends on the perspective, right? So if we're in software, it's through our tools, if you will, right? So we've got our product delivery model. We have that flow from intake, from the demand, right, in the business. So the consumer is telling the business, I need, business assesses, decides on the priorities of those demands, starts that flow down through within the company to the teams that will be providing the solution, right? So we can set up a Kanban from intake all the way to production, and even post-production. We can have a single, really mature processes are, flow from end to end. And I don't know if you've ever heard that term, end-to-end flow. That's what they're talking about. It's a giant Kanban, essentially. A lot of businesses, when they start their transformations, they start with the one team, right? But manufacturing, so you mentioned supermarkets. Walmart has perfected the supply and demand and how they manage that flow. Every time you scan something at the register, that sends a signal from the register to their inventory system, and they're tracking, what shelf, what product item, what size, and how often that's purchased, and so how often to replenishment. They don't want too much sitting in the warehouse, et cetera, et cetera. So these principles that started in the 1940s with Taiichi Ohno, it's touched everything. So pretty amazing.
Right. So when we're talking core principles of Kanban, there are 4. Visualize the work, which we've made pretty apparent is going to be your board. Make process policies explicit. Limit work in progress. Measure and manage flow. So let's take a walk through these.
Okay.
Visualizing work, like we said, you just want to have transparency. When you have the ability to show management, customers, consumers, like whoever just has the ability to view the board. Hey, here's what's in our backlog. Here's what we're working on. Here's what's ready for production rollout. You name it. People have the ability just to see it and go, yes, I know where the thing that I care about is at. And, if anything needs to change or priorities need to shift, that conversation can be, hey, why is that a lower priority than this? And then the team can get together, the product owner, whoever's responsible for managing your priorities can say, hey, here's why we're doing what we're doing. But there's that level of transparency that allows for those conversations to take
absolutely.
place.
So in Taiichi's day, and still today, and when you have in manufacturing, you have a production system. They instituted another term called a gemba. And that is when, the management actually comes down out of their offices, they go down to the floor, they go down to the line, and they walk through that process, and they're checking things out. You got
to go to where the work is.
You have to go to where the work is, and you check it out. And so that's one of the things about, being transparent and visual is also, get yourself inserted into what's going on and really see what's happening, right? So in software or on the technology side, the way that we see those things are through our tools, right? So Jira, version 1 Rally, those kinds of things, Azure, and our board. You can do it on a wall, and even if you're at home, you're a parent and you have kids and you want to set up a board for chores, you can do that too, right? You're making it visible. They pull their work. You don't have to ask them, did you do your chores? Because if they're using the board, you can see it, right? Now, then you do your Gemba and you walk and you check it out, right?
And you do the trust but verify.
Right, trust but verify.
That's right.
But the point is when you're visualizing your work, this is the whole purpose of the board, is so that you can really see and assess and know where things are at without having to interrupt somebody and go, hey, give me a status report, or that flies in the face of making all of this transparent and visual.
Right. So the second principle, making policies explicit. Why don't you explain to the folks at home what the heck they're talking about here?
Okay. So we have these columns in Kanban are not really called columns, they're called queues. And so what we do is we want to measure how quickly things take to go from, well, I have this idea, we need to work on this, and it's done. So each of these queues are measured, and we're tracking what's going on. But in order for something to move from queue to queue, we have to know when it's ready to go from queue to queue, like ready to go in, ready to come out. Those are what we call policies. So we want to make those policies explicit so that everybody understands, what the agreement is. I don't want to call them rules, but what really is it? What does it mean to go from queue to queue?
So for us, let's just take our Kanban card. We had it in our backlog, and to say from backlog to ready, we needed to make a deck like what we're referencing right now. We have a Kanban deck. We have the time to film. We have the means to edit. Right. We are ready to film. We are ready to do post production, if you will, on this. And
believe it or not, we kind of do a quality check. I know it's hard to believe, but right.
But we don't have a column for that. We could say there's there's an editing column.
That's right.
And then a quality assurance column that meets everything that we need. But we have those phase gates on here as well, right? We say, hey, it's backlog. It is now ready to end work. We're in work right now. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. We have our own self-imposed policies that we put on our own content on how we do our own work.
Now you said something that I know triggers some conversation.
Phase gate.
You said phase gates. And so that's a red flag. Let's just talk about that real quick. Should we?
We should.
All right, let's talk about that. This is not to be confused with waterfall, right? Or milestone decision gates. This is a flow, a continuous flow, something that we are constantly monitoring, and we'll talk about watching for bottlenecks and theory and constraints of all that as part of this flow. There is at no point should a manager step in and stop the flow as I need to approve something before it moves as part of these policies being explicit. That's a no. That is an absolute no. no one should be stopping the flow because they need to be the approval authority to go from queue to queue. That's what the policies are for.
Mm-hmm.
It's that trust. It's that confidence in the system. It's we've spelled it all out. It's all of that.
Right. So in this sense, we're not saying that anything that's in work is going to be there for a year, because that would break the trust in the system, right? We're not saying that this is so waterfall eccentric that it's going to go backlog ready in work and it's going to sit here forever and ever and ever and ever. There's still those agile principles of doing small batched work, of doing things and in terms of hours and maybe even a couple of days, but you don't like what we said about those guardrails. There's no upward bound of like a 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week iteration anymore. Now it's just, hey, this is the work we want done. Here's the constraints. Here's our flow. How do we move our work through these flows? How long is it taking? Right, we got this cycle time, which we're not really going to get too deep into.
Yeah, we've got a whole session on metrics, and I think we're going to break it down into 2 sessions because we could spend a lot of time on measuring these things and the difference of what we're measuring in Scrum and Kanban. Yeah, we're probably going to spend a lot of time on those sessions. So let's just say that the flow is managed in part through these policies that we are making explicit for everyone who is involved to be aware of.
Right. We're letting the process manage the flow.
Exactly.
That's right.
Ready?
Sure. So principle 3, limit work in progress or limit work in process. What's the difference?
Well, okay, so work in progress is the total amount of work you have committed to but have not completed at any time on the entire board. Work in process, on the other hand, is all of the work that is actively being worked at any one time in each queue. So these are 2 terms that are often misused or used interchangeably, thinking that they're the same thing, but they're really not.
So for us in our example here, this is the only thing that's currently in progress. If we had a quality assurance column, the Scrum card, which we filmed last week, would be in like the quality check, quality control column. But for work in progress, it's just this.
This is process.
No, this is progress.
Okay.
And process, you said, is every queue, because we're doing some ready work as well.
Right.
So progress and then process is these other columns, because we're working on the metrics one as well.
Yep.
So that would be the other queues, right?
That would be all of the queues.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So tell them about theory of constraints.
All right. So theory of constraints is a concept that shapes how we measure and make improvements. And a simple explanation of a theory of constraint is the output of any system or the process is limited by the number of constraints in that process, right? So it's the bottlenecks. It's the number of things that we are blocked by. So those would be our constraints to our flow. So we want to identify that and then see where we can make those improvements in our flow so that we're not constrained.
Right on.
Okay.
So we visualized, we have explicitly, made the policies very clear for how we're moving our work through the flow. And now we have the ability to put limits on our work to reduce the amount of bottlenecks. And because we have all of this stuff visualized, we can manage and measure our flows and make sure we are the most efficient, right? We are using Kaizen for continuous improvement. We're using Gemba to make sure that the work is being understood. We're going to where the work is being done. And so now what we're doing is we're saying we're looking at the flow end to end, and we're looking for those bottlenecks, right? We're looking for those lack of flows, as they were.
Right.
So how would that manifest itself?
The lean principle is, where is there waste?
Right.
So if it's time, then that's where we want to reduce that amount of time. Where is that time, given the process? If it's software, is it in refinement? We got too much time being taken in refinement, and we can't get a ready backlog in a sustainable state where the team can be constantly pulling work, right? Or if it's in manufacturing, it's like we have a supplier that's delivering something to the production line, So when we make our order, the order might take minutes, but in order for that to get to us might take weeks, right? So we can probably make it in days so that waste is from the supply chain, right, to the production line. So we would go, let's look at, how can we improve that? It's just an example.
All right. So that all said, Kaizen, I threw that word out there, but it is really just continuous improvement. It is finding those constraints. It's finding those bottlenecks, the lack of flow, the waste, the time suck meetings or whatever's going on that are taking away from the ability to deliver the product, and just making those improvements. It's evolution, not revolution. This is something, again, over time, you're constantly improving. It's not you make an improvement and you're done making improvements. That's not what continuous improvement is about. So
I want to call out, and I'll probably offend some people here, and I'm really not trying to offend anyone who I'm about to call out. But I am a Six Sigma green belt, and so I'm also a PMP, project management professional. In the day, back in especially waterfall and manufacturing, Six Sigma uses a lot of these lean principles, right? Kaizen before Agile was an event. It was, the Six Sigma people would go, okay, we're going to review your process. And so we're going to map out your process, which is great because we still do value stream mapping. So the Six Sigma people would, do your value stream mapping. And this would be the Kaizen event, right? Because we need to find areas of waste. We're going to make some improvements, yada, yada. So the difference is from an Agile perspective, Kaizen or continuous improvement is not an event. It is an everyday baked in mindset perspective that every day you show up for work, you're thinking about how can I improve myself? How can I improve my teammates? How can I improve our process? Every day, all day, every day. So that's the difference from an Agile perspective, when we talk about continuous improvement, and from a Six Sigma continuous improvement perspective, two different things. So I just wanted to make sure we called that out, that when we say Kaizen from an Agile perspective, it's all the time. If you're looking from a Six Sigma, old school continuous improvement function, it's an event. And so
it's a little different. Sure. So that's Kanban in a nutshell, right? Mm-hmm. The end-to-end, the flow, the process, so let's talk a little bit about roles. Now, when we talk about roles, we had our previous videos when we went in depth into product owner, the team, and the Scrum Master, which is specific to Scrum. Product owner and the team, their roles are pretty much the same. The big difference here is that the Scrum Master is going to be a team facilitator, just a difference in title. Does that role really change that much? Does the team facilitator have a different outlook than a Scrum Master does for their Scrum team?
Not really. They're virtually they're performing the same functions, still facilitating, still encouraging, still coaching, still inspiring and motivating, still trying to watch and help the team measure the metrics. It's still a lot of pretty much identical things, but it's Kanban, it's not Scrum. So we don't have a Scrumban master. We have a facilitator or a coach in Kanban.
And we don't have a Scrum team. We have a development team.
We have a team.
Right.
We have a team.
And that team can be made up of analysts, QA, QE, architecture, security.
Everybody pulling from the queue.
That's right. So everyone working together in a collaborative, autonomous structure, very similar to how a Scrum team brings upon itself. But again, there's no guardrails.
Right.
There's no, we have to start a sprint on a Monday and 10 days away on a Friday.
Right. So when I say that, we talked about the guardrails, and when we talked about Scrum, we want a cross-functional team, right? So a really high-performing Scrum team is also a cross-functional team, right? So when we're talking about Kanban and we're pulling from the ready queue, that means anyone who's done with whatever work that they were working on, who is now available, comes to the ready queue and pulls from the top story, shouldn't look at that and go, oh no, that's not for me. Mine, oh yeah, I'm down here. That's my next body of work. No, it is not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm talking about, that's really one of the underlying things about, a really mature team, because that mature team is a high functioning team. They're disciplined, they're cross-functional. You know what I mean? So they're actively working and managing their queues. They're helping each other. They're pair programming. They're quality, checking all of their work. They're doing all of the things that need to be done in a very efficient way.
Probably test-driven development if they're really good.
Yeah, all of that. So that's what I'm talking about.
But again, I think it's important to call out that the team is going to decide how the work is going to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's still no upper management coming to you.
Nope.
Say you're a team member saying, you have to code and deliver this way. It's a team decision.
This is a pull system, not a push system.
That's right.
Okay.
So the last role, product owner. Product owners, again, they're going to manage the response. They're going to be the responsible authority for the backlog. They're going to make sure that the priority is correct based on stakeholder client needs. They're going to have those conversations with the team to say, hey, here's what our prioritized backlog is, all of our items. Do they make sense? Do we need to change priorities based on conversations? Do we need to re-refine or even just refine it all? Things like that. So they're going to be responsible for maintaining that backlog and ensuring that everyone knows the priority. But again, if this is somewhere that is visible, everyone should be able to look at the backlog and look at the ready column and know immediately what the highest priority items are.
Yeah.
But if you got someone sitting up at the top says this is priority 1 and it's at the bottom of the list, somebody can come around and say, hey, that's our highest priority, why is it down to the bottom? And then you can make those fixes.
Another let's do a compare of this to Scrum. So when the product owner in Scrum is managing the backlog before sprint planning, that the priority of what's in that backlog can change all day, every day, and no one cares until sprint planning, when the team commits to, we're going to do this in the sprint. Once that committed work goes into the sprint backlog, it's hands off product owner. You let the team, leave them alone. In this case, this ready column the priority can change all day, every day, period. The team doesn't care until they pull it from the ready into end work. And then if the product owner keeps coming back and goes, stop that, work on this instead. This is I need, wait, okay, you got you've got a whip of 3. You know what? You've got 5 things here because you keep coming in and changing the priority of things that we need to work on. It's not a push system. It's a pull system. But you can rearrange the order of the priority of the ready column as many times as you want. But once it's pulled, leave them alone, right? You finish what you start before you start something else. Right. So that's a big difference. And that's where a lot of teams that aren't mature and disciplined enough, again, it's another example of why, I think Kanban is suited for mature teams, high-performing teams, because they will have the wherewithal to tell that product owner, hey, listen, there are Kanban boards, we said that there's all these columns, but there's also swim lanes or other ways that you can introduce work that's super hot, super high priority. You have an expedite lane in your advanced boards where, something in production might absolutely be hot. Oh my gosh, we've got to stop everything you're doing. We've got to do this. But that usually has a whip of 1. You know what I mean? So you usually don't keep throwing things in the expedite lane just because you know that that's going to stop everything else. That's not how this works, right? So you want to keep that as the exception and not the rule. But there we do make allowances for that.
Right, but if everything's important, nothing's important.
That's exactly right.
That's right. You're never going to know what a priority is if everything's priority.
Yeah, exactly.
So roles, that there's some similarities, mostly a lot of the same, just kind of like semantic title changes between the two different frameworks there.
Mm-hmm.
That all said, some of the ceremonies even overlap a little bit.
Sure.
One of the bigger differences is that we're not doing backlog refinement to sprint planning. We are doing committed backlog replenishment. So
right.
Why don't you tell the folks what that is?
Right. So it is it's a way for the product owner and the team to still collaborate on getting everything ready, in the ready state, I should say, for the team to pull and work. Say, for example, you're an engineer and you're pulling a story from the ready column and you look at this and go, well, that's not ready. I know I can't work this. I have several questions. And from what I can see right now, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be blocked. What do you think that's going to do to the flow?
It's going to jam it up.
Yeah. What we don't want to do is, you'll see this on a lot of boards, is that there's blocked columns. There's columns for things that are blocked in more than one queue. You really shouldn't have, a blocked column for things that are in work. If you've met the definition of ready, and it meets the policies that you've made explicit, right? You want to pull from ready because it's truly ready.
Right.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So part of that part of that backlog replenishment is making sure that you have work to go from here to here, and the things that are here are truly ready.
So that's a collaborative meeting between the team and the product owner to get together to ask questions about things in the backlog, talk about like what the ask is. Yep. Basically say we're going to sign off on it. They're going to estimate this too, whether it's
if the team is refining over here with the product owner, and the team says, "Oh, there's no way, a product owner, don't put that in the ready queue because there's no way we're going to get to that," even if it's the highest priority, unless the task is, let's figure out a way, run it through the flow to get it unblocked so that we can work it. Okay, but other than that.
Right, and then I've seen, working with Kanban teams, the most practical estimation practices, relative sizing, kind of like a t-shirt model, small, medium, large. Points don't really make sense in this model.
They really don't. The flow is all about work in progress limits. I know we didn't really spend a whole lot of time on work in progress limits. So let's spend just a minute to talk about that a little bit more. If you keep overwhelming or overloading that queue, that in progress queue, like for us, we have a work in progress of one. We're going to make one video on our video on one topic at a time. If we were all over the place, we're going to talk about Kanban, and while we're at it, let's talk about, metrics. So let's spend another hour on metrics. And then let's talk about this or that. We'd be all over the place. Not very efficient, right? Low value. In technology or in manufacturing, it's the same thing. If you overwhelm your system, if you overwhelm your people with too many things, too much demand, quality goes down and efficiency is lost. So the whole theory of work in progress limits manages that flow at a steady state. So you find your sweet spot with your team or your manufacturing line. And so how many things can I get through the line in a period of time that is smooth? So that's the difference or the purpose of a work in progress limit, right? So we've talked about the backlog replenishment. and the purpose behind that and how it's similar to, Scrum if you do refinement in Scrum. What's another one?
So the daily stand-up, you might have heard the daily Scrum, the 15-minute meeting, but we're going to call it the daily stand-up because, again, this is not Scrum, this is Kanban, but it's going to be very, very similar. I don't think really anything changes.
Nothing.
Where the team is going to get together and they're going to ask themselves, what'd you do yesterday? What are you doing today? Do you have any blockers? Setting those daily micro goals for themselves and for the team, and trying to build trust within each other and find the areas where you can help me, I can help you, and where there's waste. And if there's anything blocked, the team facilitator will unblock it for them, remove those impediments. All feels very similar.
It is identical. Same. Identical.
So the next one, the review demo.
All right, so here's a little bit of a difference where, in Scrum, I hate to say it, but, especially before it evolved, everything was reviewed at the end of your sprint or your iteration, right? Thankfully, a lot of that has evolved to where the product owner is checking things out as they're done as the sprint goes on, right? So it's not all, dumped at the end of the sprint. Similarly, because of that evolvement, and probably through Kanban, is that, as work is done, that product owner has got that responsibility to constantly be checking the work for acceptance, right? So if there is a need that has value to demonstrate, because there's no sprint review, right? That we want to demonstrate to some stakeholder a body of work, then we schedule that, right? But yeah, so it's not at the end of a time box. It's where, the team feels that, hey, or the product owner is like, wow, that work is amazing. I'd love to show this off. Great. You just kind of decide when that is, or how often that is. But it's on a different set of rules, right? It's not based on the end of a cadence.
Right. And so the last ceremony that's called for is a retrospective. Again, you inspect and you adapt and you say, hey, here's what we did. Here's what worked well. Here's what we can do better. And, here's what we need to make changes upon. Again, if you're doing Kaizen, retrospective should be, in my opinion, pretty short. There shouldn't be much to reflect on if you're reflecting every day. Right? You shouldn't need to block out an hour or two to have a sit down and have a group, like a hard group, think about where you can make improvements. Because again, like we said, Kaizen should be a baked in, day-to-day, 24/7. You wake up thinking about continuous improvement. You go to bed thinking about continuous improvement.
Watching your metrics, the whole 9 yards all the time.
Yeah, a retrospective in this sense should just be like another 15-minute meeing where you come in and say, is there anything we need to talk about? Everyone says no, and you go home. That'd be a perfect world. That's not what happens.
Yeah. Again, so where in Scrum, you would usually hold your retrospective after your sprint review at the end of your sprint, where we don't have time boxes in Kanban. So it's one of those things where the team feels like, what, we haven't really just kind of stepped away from the process, even though we are looking at it. Maybe we just do need to step away from that for an hour or so, and let's have a conversation about X, Y, and Z. So it still serves the same purpose. It is meant for reflection with the outcome of improving something or even recognizing things that are going great, right? But it's as needed. So it's not on a regular scheduled cadence like you do in Scrum.
And that's it for today, folks. Thanks again for watching another video with us. We hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications. And if you like what we do here, share it with your friends and your family or coworkers. And I think we'll catch you on the next video.